My nose was beginning to run as I stood in our chilly, overcrowded attic. I'd been shifting bulky, overloaded cardboard boxes from one space to another. I had nearly cleared a path to the Christmas decorations. One weekend I would get things organized up here, but that wasn't happening today. I could hear the rumble of the kids tearing through the house below and knew my wife, Melissa, would be anxiously awaiting my return with at least some of the decorations so she could distract them with hanging lights or arranging the manger scene. Anything to take the edge off the mania that had set in since school vacation began 4 days before. Hefting the first bin that I saw labeled Christmas, I stepped down the corridor I'd made through the mess that was our attic storage space until I reached the steps. Glancing down, I saw Melissa, framed in the doorway, looking down the hall. In the instant before she turned to me, I thought she'd looked agitated, one hand on her forehead, and tapping one foot. Come on, that didn't take that long, I thought. "Ho, ho, ho!" I bellowed, awkwardly descending the steps as the bin bowed in the middle with the weight of its contents. Melissa's face brightened the instant she saw me. "All done?" she asked expectantly. "Of course not. There must be 5 more bins up there." She rolled her eyes and turned sideways to fit past me. "I'll get them," she said in a hurried breath. "No, you won't. You'll break your back. These things weigh a ton. We should consider donating some of this stuff. I don't think we put up even half of it." Before she could respond, a resounding thud shook the house. It was followed swiftly by the shattering of a ceramic plate or bowl somewhere downstairs. I closed my eyes, waiting for it. Then it came, a shriek of, "Mom!" Next came a cascade of protests and accusations echoing from the kitchen. Our children were reliable in all things, good and bad. Melissa shook her head and turned to leave. "I'll have the rest down in a few more trips," I said to her back as she stalked off down the hall. A tired, floated back to me. I wasn't even to the top of the attic stairs when the opening chords of White Christmas sang out their sweet nostalgia. I could imagine that Melissa had already tossed water on the flames of the argument and had the kids cleaning up their mess, singing happily. She could spin the dynamic of a room in an instant. I had always marveled at her charisma. No one could withstand it. I made short work of the next several bins of Christmas decor. It was the last one that I took issue with. It was enormous. I'd have to enlist one of the kids to help me lug it downstairs. Even then, it seemed like it would be dangerously heavy. I decided to take a quick inventory and determine if this one really needed to come downstairs. The cardboard flaps opened awkwardly, and I had to cram myself against the wall to get a look inside. Craning my neck and peeking in, I saw wrapping paper, Christmas tree placemats, and stockings. I knew we'd want the stockings, but the rest seemed like a toss-up. As I leaned back to slide out from behind the box, my elbow cracked against the wall. I braced for the inevitable shock of sparks and pain from hitting my funny bone, but they didn't come. It didn't hurt at all. The wall had even given way a little when I hit it. The sound had been oddly hollow. I scrambled out and looked back to see a small panel of wood, perhaps 1 by 1 foot, now leaning into the room. It must have been loose, and then I'd knocked it askew. I reached out to press it back into place and felt a breath of even colder air seeping in through the space. There was insulation missing back there. I'd hung the insulation myself years before and couldn't recall a loose panel. I'd need to fill that in, but it would be quick work. I bounced downstairs with a spring in my step. I always liked home improvement jobs when I had the tools and the supplies on hand, and this time I did. I snatched a spare roll of insulation from the box in the garage where I'd stored the leftover bits from the attic project, and popped my headlamp on. Before heading back up, I leaned into the kitchen. Melissa and the kids were stringing popcorn onto some fishing line, destined to ring the Christmas tree. I set my headlamp to flashing red before interrupting. Rudolph suggests you do some cranberries, too, I quipped with a goofy smile. The kids giggled without breaking their focus on the popcorn and line. I asked Melissa what she wanted from the big Christmas box in the attic. She looked at me, the headlamp, and the insulation in my hand. "What's going on?" she asked, with something in her tone I couldn't quite place. It wasn't playful. She sounded oddly alert. "Just some missing insulation upstairs," I said, trying to put her at ease. "Can it wait?" she pleaded. "I need a break." "I guess it can. It's just letting in cold air. Give me a second to put this stuff down." I stepped out of the kitchen and headed back up to the second floor. I realized I'd underestimated the drain had been putting on Melissa the last few days. Racing up the stairs to the attic, I tossed the spare insulation aside. Tomorrow, I thought. Before leaving, I thought I'd make some executive decisions on the decorations. I reached in and rifled around blindly for the stockings. From downstairs, I heard Melissa shouting my name with something like panic in her voice. At last, feeling the knit material of the stockings, I pulled them out in a bundle. One flew from my grasp and slipped behind the box against the offending wall panel. I leaned over the box to reach it. My headlamp, still blinking red, dyed the wall crimson in brief flashes. Just as I seized the stocking, I noticed something glinting off the red flashes behind the loose panel. Was there an electrical junction box back there? That would explain the gap in the insulation. I never like to get insulation too close to those. I clicked the headlamp button once, and a steady white light shone into the dark space. There, in the slight gap behind the wood, was an ornate metal box. I gawked at the object like it was an intruder. How did it get there? This alien object buried in the wall of my house. I reached out gingerly and flicked at the lid. It swung open briefly and fell back into place with a slight clink. In that instant, I'd seen inside. My stomach churned as I gazed at the closed box. Driver's licenses. I'd seen multiple driver's licenses in the box. I marshaled my will and pulled the box out. In a rush, I flipped open the lid. A gasped, "Oh God," came out of me in a quick inhale of breath. I'd been right. There were 6 driver's licenses in the box. All men. All different men. Most from out of state. But that wasn't all. Neatly scotch-taped to each license was a ring. A wedding band. The scalp on the back of my head began to tingle and creep on my skull. I knew instantly. These were souvenirs. Someone had killed these men. "Ethan!" Melissa's voice cut from downstairs, now entirely out of patience and sharp with exasperation. I pulled my phone out and snapped a photo of the box's contents. Hastily, I closed the lid and tucked it back into the niche in the wall. As I pressed the little panel of wood back into place, I told myself there was no need to bring this thing down into our home today. No need to horrify my wife. There would be time to deal with it, and soon, but not today. Not with our kids making popcorn strings and Bing Crosby floating on the air. I squeezed my eyes shut and took a deep breath as I closed the attic door. Just touching that metal box had made me feel queasy. A killer had been in this house. A killer had hidden that there. Who? The former owner? And when? And why leave it behind? Perhaps most terrifying was the notion that whoever left it might want it back. The cold bit into my fingers, hard, as I worked on the lights. I had one section of roofline left to cover. The sting of a shattered bulb lingered as I clumsily pressed a tissue into my palm. Blood was already soaking through, but I barely registered the pain. My mind was somewhere else. Up in the attic, behind that loose panel, on the box, and what was inside. I kept glancing toward the street. Every car that slowed sent a jolt of panic through me. Were they watching? Was that driver him? A red sedan crawled past, brake lights flickering as it approached the intersection. My breath caught in my throat, and I fumbled with the next string of lights. When the red car finally turned the corner and disappeared, I exhaled shakily, but the relief didn't last long. A man in a hoodie jogged by, his pace steady but unhurried. Too unhurried? My eyes followed him, my jaw clenched involuntarily. He paused at the end of the block, stretching his calf against a telephone pole. Stretching or stalling? Was there a blade tucked in his sock? Would he be back tonight? Over the fence in the backyard and through an unlocked window? I carried on, hanging the lights, my movements stiff, joyless. I forced myself to focus on the task. Let's get this done, I half sighed under my breath. But my eyes kept darting back to the jogger. He lingered for another moment before rounding the corner. It wasn't just him. A delivery van idled at the other end of the street, its engine muttering softly in the cold. The driver sat inside, motionless. I stared at the van, hearing my own pulse in my ears. Why wasn't he moving? What was he waiting for? What was in the back of that van? It had only been an hour since I'd found the box, and already it was crippling me. But it wasn't just paranoia. Someone had left that box in my house. A sharp wind snapped through the yard, swinging a strand of lights against the siding with a crack. I cursed under my breath and grabbed the loose string. Forcing myself to finish without turning to scan the street again, I made a hasty job of securing the last of the twinkle lights. I finally stepped back to look at the house. The lights, blinking cheerfully in the darkness. They felt like a lie. A bright, merry lie. I rubbed my hands together, trying to warm them, and willed myself to go back inside. The moment I stepped through the door, I felt a rush of warmth and tension. Melissa glanced up from the living room, where the kids had moved their popcorn stringing operation. "How's it going out there?" she asked, her tone light, but her eyes lingering on me longer than I liked at the moment. "It's cold," I said, trying to sound casual. I slipped off my boots and hung my coat by the door. There, looking at my family, all at once, I decided to bring the box down, to show Melissa. She deserved to know. We'd call the police, get it out of our house, and put this bizarre incident behind us. I climbed the attic stairs slowly, the creaks underfoot loud in the silence. My breath sent out a little ghost with each exhale as I reached the top, the cold air wrapping around me like a shroud. My headlamp, still slung around my neck, cast a faint, bouncing glow over the boxes and bins piled high in the cramped space. I felt the weight of the decision pressing down on me. Showing Melissa the box, calling the police, doing the right thing. I suddenly felt as though I wasn't alone in the attic, like I'd slide the panel aside and see a face leering up at me. I paused, just listening. Then, quit stalling, I thought. The loose panel came into view just as I'd left it earlier. My palms began to sweat despite the chill in the air. I steadied myself, stepping over the clutter until I was right in front of it. I crouched down and reached out, my fingers brushing the edge of the panel. Something would change forever in our house once I pulled this away. I moved the panel and stared into the dark void behind it. I think my heart literally skipped a beat. The box wasn't there. The floor seemed to be pulling back under my feet, and I toppled sidelong onto the big Christmas box that started all of this. After falling, I didn't move. I just lay on my back, gazing up at the yellow, brown wooden rafters. What did this mean? There had to be a reasonable explanation. No one had gone into the house while I was hanging the lights. I knew. I was already defending my mind against the inevitable conclusion. It was barreling toward me. I tried to hide a bit longer. I yanked the headlamp off my neck and pointed it around the attic, scanning the floors, the boxes, the walls. Maybe it had fallen. Maybe I hadn't wedged it in securely. But the space around the panel was empty. The box had been taken away in the last few minutes. In a horrifying rush, I allowed my mind to process the nightmare my life was about to become. The unthinkable. "Melissa," I whispered. One more miniature ghost sailed across the attic and disappeared. I don't know exactly how I got up off my hands and knees and walked downstairs. It was like I was watching myself do it. My limbs moved like I was walking underwater. I had no plan. I couldn't begin to think of what I would do next. I wandered into the living room to find Melissa and the kids opening boxes of tree ornaments. They were arguing about whether the homemade decorations from their kindergarten days could finally be retired. Melissa gasped dramatically and shouted, "I love them! They're mine forever!" Her voice an overdone lunatic howl. She dove on our youngest son and tickled him mercilessly. He began laughing, then shrieking, then screeching wildly as she carried on with the playful torture. I had moved from my place in the doorway. I stared down at the scene. Melissa hunched over our son, him struggling beneath her, screaming. My face suddenly felt hot, and a ringing came into my ears. I pulled my eyes away and sat dumbly on an end table, staring ahead. The next hour unfolded painfully. I felt a grotesque blend of horror and guilt as we decorated the Christmas tree as a family. I couldn't bring myself to feel sad, even as I realized that this might be the last moment of its kind for our little tribe. Every chance I had, I found myself studying Melissa, the way she moved, the looks on her face. I was desperate to see what I'd clearly been missing for so long. I found nothing amiss. No trace of guilt in the smile lines on her cheeks or forehead. Her eyes flashed the same brilliant blue that dazzled me and everyone else that she met. As I sat on an ottoman watching the kids slosh water in and around the tree stand, I felt Melissa's hand slide up the back of my neck. Frozen, I tried my best not to let my body evince the terror I felt. I don't know if I succeeded. She leaned in close, her cheek brushing my jaw. Anyone watching would have thought it a cute pose for a Christmas card. The happy couple watching their children hang candy canes on the tree. Then she spoke in a low voice. "Look at everything we have. So much to be thankful for. So much to lose." I felt the shock of pinpricks all over my scalp. I abruptly stood and told the kids it was time to get ready for bed. "I'll do bedtime," my voice devoid of emotion. To my great relief, Melissa didn't follow us upstairs. I went through the nighttime routines with the kids robotically, my heart filled with disgust as I found myself continually glancing to the staircase to make sure we were alone up there. As I closed the door to my eldest's bedroom, I suddenly felt nauseous. I was sleepwalking through this mess and still had no semblance of a plan. I moved stiffly to the stairs and began down. She knows I know, I thought, nearing the landing. Was I about to die? I found the kitchen empty. Dishes were piled in the sink with a steady drip, slowly filling a red and green mug. I took the time to press the sink handle down firmly and stop the drip. I don't know why. The appalling quiet that rushed in and filled the space the water drops had vacated made my head spin. After staring uselessly at the sink of dishes for several more interminable minutes, Melissa put me out of my misery. The sound of her clearing her voice loudly from the living room was more than enough. I was being summoned. She was kneeling by the Christmas tree. Her face was neutral. I couldn't read what she wanted from me, if anything. It was another moment in a long history of moments in the time I'd known Melissa when it was clear who was running the show. Then I saw the box. She had placed it under the tree, like a present. I didn't have time to explore how disgusting that was, because she spoke. Can only imagine what you must be thinking. With the tension broken, I collapsed onto the couch, my body suddenly feeling exhausted. However, my mind continued to race. Melissa didn't break our eye contact, continuing, "Let me explode some of your bigger fears right away. I'm not going to hurt you or the kids. Ever." "Thanks," I scoffed. Looking back, that was a sickly, comical response. In the moment, she didn't break stride or even acknowledge that I'd spoken. "But you need to know this too. I don't want to stop," she said with a confidence that left no room for doubt. Gesturing to the box, she carried on. "Those men, they deserved it. They hurt people. Not me, but good, innocent people. As far as I'm concerned, those IDs and rings are more evidence of public service than any amount of hours I could log working at the food bank." I still couldn't speak. I didn't have anything to say. She smiled, a tight smile, and raised her eyebrows. "I'm going out now. You can think things over and ask questions when I get back if you want. But I wouldn't recommend it. I know you won't do anything rash. Don't forget who's sleeping upstairs." Without another word, she pulled on a dark, hooded jacket that I'd never seen before and left the room. A moment later, I heard the front door softly close. Looking past the Christmas tree and out the window, I watched her pacing quickly down the driveway, the red house lights casting a sinister glow on her back as she went. She didn't look back at the house before disappearing into the darkened street. It's been nearly 10 years since that night. It might surprise you to hear that I've still never laid my head on the pillow at night in fear of my wife. The only thing that causes me to lose sleep is the idea that she'll slip up, that our kids will see her face on the news someday. There are plenty of aspersions I cast on myself. Immoral, selfish, cowardly, complicit. All deserved, I'm sure of it. It's extra hard to look myself in the mirror on the mornings when I don't know where Melissa has been the night before. And I never ask. I just get dressed and try to enjoy my first cup of coffee. Every year when the Christmas tree goes up, I involuntarily glance under it each time I enter the room, looking for that silver box. It's never there, of course, but I know it's still up there, behind the panel in the attic. Sometimes, when I'm alone in bed at night and the house is very still, I swear I can hear the tiny metallic squeak of its lid opening. And if I'm right, then it's her up there, adding to the collection.